So, Huru, we're going to pick this up, part two of this discussion, because again, just last week, 7 days ago, we had these elections nationwide. In Maryland, we had an also election for governor, and you had the Democrats come out. You had a lot of interesting combinations, right, of people running for governor in the Democratic ticket. Here in Maryland, Ben Jealous won. He has Turnbull, who is I forgot her first name, but she used to be the
Susie Turnbull.
Susie. She used to be the Democratic Party's chair for the state of Maryland, so she's a part of the machine. And you have Ben Jealous, who is a part of the black petty bourgeoisie, right? Used to be the former leader of the NAACP, which is, again, a very solid black middle-class organization and aware of its class interests. Let's talk a little bit about it. There's some history we want to make sure people know about. Brother Bang, maybe let's talk about a little bit some of this stuff that we've got to, like how these forces are lining up, how so-called liberals and progressives and revolutionaries are lining up, in this question.
Yeah, so for looking at that on the revolutionary aspect, I see it as we have to question everything that we see, because against the people he were running with, I'm just going to take the Baker and Embry. I understand that Elizabeth Embry is the daughter of Bob Embry, the Able Foundation. My point being is that I believe that there is a contradiction or proximity relationship to the O'Malley administration, the establishment of how the Baker and Embry relationship to Martin O'Malley can also be something that can be warranted back a few years ago. Maybe Ben Jealous might be part of that same thread and clothing. The differences that I see today with now Ben Jealous getting the nomination to be able to run in the primaries against Governor Hogan, which is something that, again, that's the primary, the general elections in November after winning the primaries, is for revolutionaries, we have to question everything to understand that for him to be the president of the NAACP, an organization for civil rights that were once a beacon of power, to be able to fight against the capitalists, to be able to fight against those who had the power, the money, and the infrastructure to use the public resources or anything that is at their disposal to grab, to use against those on the pro-workers and poor level, to now be someone who came out of that NAACP leadership model as the president at one point in time, and also a venture capitalist. Something that we may not hear often, but we need to hear to understand that anytime we see people who are progressive or deem themselves as socialists endorsing someone who had a venture capitalist lens under the guises of civil rights fighter and leader, I think we have confused ourselves with the petty bourgeoisie who may be attached to establishment politics with the likes of O'Malley, who've also had their tentacles on other candidates who are in this race. So I see it as the door may have been left open for some candidates to leave out or exit through one and let the candidate of the candidacy or the nomination of Ben Jealous to come in. So again, we may have been hoodwinked in the state of Maryland to actually think that we've gotten something different, but we just probably got another version of something we should not have in the first place.
Well, I think the question for us is, and the forces that lined up behind Ben Jealous represent, as far as it's concerned, a progressive part of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, right? So he had Bernie Sanders come in. He had Dave Chappelle come in. He had other kind of, Cory Booker come in. So these all represent some of the more liberal sectors of the Democratic Party. Again, for us, and this is clear, because people have to be clear about who we are. We are trying to help people understand that imperialist parties do not serve the interests of working class people. They do not serve the interests of Black, brown, indigenous people, right? Because those things are counter to what capitalism needs, right? We oppose capitalism. We're an anti-capitalist, anti-oppression party. And there is no real liberal form of oppression. You're either oppressed or you're not oppressed, right? You're either for capitalism or against capitalism. Ben Jealous is for capitalism, right? He was
Yes.
endorsed, not endorsed. Let's back away from that word. He was allowed. His campaign was allowed to be in a space that we were told was an anarchist space that should be used by progressives, revolutionaries, and oppressed peoples for, as a meeting space. But yet,
Yes.
Ben Jealous, who, obviously is a person of color, right? And I do mean a person of color. We'll talk about that word later. He is somebody who is out of the black community and who represents the black petty bourgeoisie, right? But they allow him to use their space to be able to propagate, spread ideas about his campaign, right? To be somehow the progressive. This is wrong. He doesn't represent the interests of working class people. He doesn't represent power to the working class and giving more power on the ground because of organization of the, through the electoral process. He's going to, if he gets elected, he's just going to run and administrate it as a liberal capitalist. That's it.
And to add to that, Comrade Nambi, as well, when I look at the event that have taken place, I believe 2 months ago at the Red Emmas, with the subtle support of Ben Jealous, or informational period where they're able to put out information about his platform and allow union leaders and rank and file to be able to come and speak about their support of him, I often ask myself, even then and even now, well, to be inside of a co-op worker establishment, why is it that he haven't sent any letter or literature or anything on his platform that said he support worker co-ops? For one, that's one thing we have to pull up. Another thing we have to ask, under the capitalist model, which we all have to understand, is the agents and tools of the state, which police brutality is used against poor workers and black people in their community. What is his platform to end police brutality against black people as well, and as well as the removal of homeless people inside of Baltimore City encampments who cannot find adequate housing, and there's not enough employment to be able to employ them so they're able to maintain that housing. And to my third point, outside of the first two that I mentioned, which something that Red Emmas as an anarchist organization and co-worker business as well should have been able to address as a litmus test to determine why he should be there as well, is what is his plan for gentrification exactly, to be able to understand that these redistricting of political lines to favor Democrats or to favor Republicans, what does that mean in the question of the gentrification, as why these political favors are being done to welcome him into the establishment to be able to speak, which he didn't, but to be able to have people to subtly support him. What is his position on gentrification in the area of North Avenue and in Baltimore City, where most of the neighborhoods are working class, are poor, and just happen to be black in the demographics of what we see, where we looking forward to seeing a comprehensive platform that represents all people, as he say, as a socialist. So to be that, you have to exemplify it in your platform and carry it out stronger than just lip service, or being able to have the celebritism or left populism to say that you're the guy for the job, when we still have people who look up and do not understand your platform and understand that it doesn't represent them as a venture capitalist, and that somebody who is a charlatan to be able to take the Democratic votes just because he had a few buzzwords like progressive and socialist behind his name.
Yeah, so, I mean, of course, Ben Jealous is not projecting himself as a Democratic socialist, but we're not saying that he did that. He is trying to project himself as a progressive. And I think the thing that's important, and this is where the disservice comes. We have a Republican governor here in Maryland, and somehow working people are supposed to be scared of a Republican governor, but not afraid of a Democratic governor. In the state of Maryland, the Democrats run both houses of the Senate and in the House of Delegates in Maryland. So there are no bills, and they have an overwhelming majority. There's no bills that get passed in Maryland that the Democrats don't sign off on, right? We have an all-Democrat political leadership in Baltimore City. Primarily, almost all, or if not all, Democrat leadership in PG County. Again, a very heavily African populated black populated county. These are not examples of Republicans being the boogeyman. It's Democrats, and somehow
Yes.
we're supposed to vote for Democrats, right? And that something's going to turn around. The fact is that Democrat Party, the Republican Party, are imperialist parties. They have no intention of alleviating or even making meaningful changes under capitalism. And that the truth is that people have to organize themselves for power on the ground to be able to force any political person in office to do what they need. And if we can get somebody elected, that person becomes the mouthpiece of the movement on the ground. That is where we're coming from, and that's what we think is very, very important in these discussions.
Yes, and then summation, and coming close to a closure, what we and that's voter base in Baltimore City, majority Democrats as well, Democratic Party as well, have to realize is that a lot of the candidates, be that Democratic or Republican, they will not twist the arms of businesses, big corporations, and as well as financial establishments and firms that are in the state of Maryland. Instead, they'll shake down the pockets of taxpayers and workers alike to the point where the water bills, the electricity bills, the energy, the natural resources that we need to be able to survive, the basic needs of survival, will always elude us or be further and further away, increasing the exploitation of labor, thus saying that the wage gap and everything that exists will make it harder just to be able to afford those basic needs, that those in office will continue to pass bills that suits the agendas or the financial obligations that's been put on them by these establishments. So we have to question those who taken that position of chief legislator or governor in the state of Maryland.
Yeah, so it definitely, again, just closing out, again, for us, the question isn't whether or not we think liberals or progressives or revolutionaries should or should not participate in electoral politics. We do believe that. We want to get on the ballot. We want to be able to develop grassroots organizers rooted in black working class politics, and to be able to build power on the ground. And whether we do that in the elections or outside of the elections, we want to be able to build power. But to substitute individuals and to just have individuals in office who promise to do their work, and whether they do or not, is not where we're trying to go. What we're attempting to do is build a base of working class people and people who stand for real justice for people, social justice. That's what we're trying to do. And that's an important discussion. We hope that you are watching this and you want to be able to contribute to that discussion, whether you agree or disagree. But we can no longer continue to participate in electoral politics and not build greater capacity to struggle. So with that, I'm Brother Nandi. Brother Brand, you have anything in closing as well, or are we going to sign out?
Yes. So last statement, we have to add the question all contradictions and use that in challenge and struggles as well. And Uhuru, this is Brandon Walker signing out from the Ujima People's Progress Party.
Uhuru.